that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. In order that all sentient beings may attain Buddhahood, from my heart I take refuge in the three jewels. Whatever the virtues of the many fields of knowledge, all are steps on the path of omniscience. May these arise in the clear mirror of intellect. O Manjushri, please accomplish this. How about we all do the supplication to Khenpo Tsogyam Gyamtso Rinpoche by His Holiness the 17th Karmapa together once. Namo Guru, self-arisen jnana, purified of fleeting stains in the enclosure of luminosity beyond holding or shunning, shines the Dharmata Guru, by kayas and wisdoms innately graced. Within recognition of my own true face, I make a supplication. Play of the emanating and gathering of life force, Bindu, great emptiness, dawning in union as the youthful signs and marks made manifest. Glorious Haruka, Samogakaya Guru, within Prajna mind inseparable, I make a supplication. Chandali's flames blaze at the threefold junction, reducing to ash all fetters, including the skandhas. Lord Guru, for whom blazing and descending dissolve into avaduti, within co-emergent melting bliss, I make a supplication. So appearance, sound, and awareness may dawn as gurus play, so wisdom, love, and power's blessings pervade my entire being. So the four Abhishekas insights, your mind merges utterly with mine, and so the two benefits may be spontaneously fulfilled. Oh, grant me now your blessings. In response to the request from Dzogchen Ponlep Rinpoche, the genuine clarifier of the teachings, I, the indolent disciple of the Guru, who's called Ugyen Trinley, i.e. the Karmapa, made the supplicated in this way to the genuine Khenpo Tsogyam Gyamtso. Okay, good evening, welcome. Hey, first, let's quickly do some logisticals. So, initially my idea was to do the next section of the Moonbeams of Mahamudra on Monday night with Tantrikas. Those who are already have received pointing out instruction, and then on Tuesday night to do Chandra Kirti's introduction to the middle way. But I realize that many people who would like to do both can't do two classes. And so it's not a good thing to do to pair those up, do them simultaneously, because people then have to pick and choose. And it'd be much better to do Chandra Kirti's introduction to the middle way, the key text of the Shadra curriculum, without any other competition, at least from this realm, happening. So, given that when I created Rime Shadra, my intention was to create a program that was not restricted to Tantrikas, that was open to everybody. I think I'll do something else on Tuesday nights. Some other texts, not quite as important as Chandra Kirti's introduction to the middle way. Possibly a sort of overview of the 5 Shadra topics course for those that can that either have not received transmission, and so would do one course, or for those that could possibly stomach 2 courses. Comments, suggestions, thoughts, briefly?
So what was that last bit? You're not
Thumbs
going
up.
to do 2 courses? or you're asking us?
I'm thinking of doing Monday night the Moonbeams, the next section of Moonbeams, which requires having a receipt pointing out for those who
Yeah.
have, and then Tuesday night doing an open course on a Shadra topic for those who are non-tantrikas or who possibly want to do two courses. And that Tuesday night course, I'm thinking maybe of doing
5 topics.
either the 5 topics, like an overview of them, or a text by Nagarjuna called The Precious Garland, where he goes through the whole path in a very wonderful way. The other option is that on Wednesday nights I've been asked to teach a book by Tralek Rinpoche, the Essence of Buddhism. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of it, but it's a really wonderful overview of the Buddhist tradition by a really amazing teacher, Tralek Rinpoche. So one option is just that people who are non-tantrikas could come to that course on Wednesday.
Is that one going through Westchester?
That is, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, that is through Westchester Meditation Center. So I'll email those who are non-tantrikas and decide amongst them what the plan for Tuesdays is. Any other comments, thoughts, suggestions, questions?
Oh, that sounds good.
Cool. So tonight's we sort of just touch on a bunch of little snippets in this huge package that I put together, which is a culled down version of the one that I created for a course a few years ago. And to start off, does anyone remember where we left off? I have an idea. I just want to see if it corresponds to others.
Well, we left off with whether electric sheep dreamed of androids, but no, I don't remember the exact page.
We stopped at page 47.
Well, that was where we stopped the reading. I didn't make it through the whole reading last week.
Page 30, halfway down.
That's what I got. Recollecting the presence. Speaking of presence, thank you all very much for your generosity. Greatly appreciated. Let's see. So here we have a presentation of the basics of shamatha by Trungpa Rinpoche. And first, he compares the two on page 30. Shamatha, development of peace; Vipassana, development of insight. And this interesting analogy later in the first paragraph: shamatha is not cutting the branches or leaves, but let's see where this is. Shamatha is not cutting the branches or leaves of the tree. That comes much later, which is a little bit unusual. You would have thought shamatha was at least trimming back some of the overgrowth of our neurotic minds. That comes much later. Before we do that, we have to acknowledge the basic treeness, the branchness, leafness, how the whole setup is seen and experienced. That is an important prerequisite for Vipassana. I found this to be really helpful and sort of profound and different take on shamatha that is not often stressed, that he brings out. That shamatha is basically connecting with the basic treeness in this analogy. So what is our basic experience as neurotic human beings? Our branchiness and leafness, our distractedness, our underlying emotionality, and so forth. How the whole setup is seen and experienced, and that is the prerequisite for then Vipassana. Then it's not that unusual, the remainder of this presentation of shamatha. So given the time constraint, I'm going to basically skip through this because I think our focus is on Vipassana. So just briefly touching on shamatha. In the next one on page 34, he states these three qualities of shamatha. As a result of mindfulness practice, we begin to develop pakya, bare attention or heedfulness, and then trenche, which is the contraction of two terms, trenpa, mindfulness, and sheshin, presently knowing or knowing. And here it just says for simplicity, together recollection, which is what we see in the Tibetan Mahamudra tradition is these terms are talked about together as being primarily the first one, trenpa, recollection or mindfulness. Then he glosses them. We develop decorum, which is heedfulness, pakya, keen attentiveness, mindfulness, and then intrinsic kind of knowing, sheshan. And these are the prerequisites for arousing bodhicitta, absolute bodhicitta. So this is the lead in to the bodhicitta slogans, which begins with the absolute bodhicitta. Well, it begins with first practice the preliminaries. And the preliminaries include the traditional ones that are common in the Tibetan tantric tradition of the four reminders, outer and inner, but also shamatha, very much so. And then bodhicitta arises from that. Four foundations of mindfulness. So there's basically two things that I wanted to talk about in his presentation of four foundations of mindfulness. Let's see, three things. One is that, well, let's first, like, why does he use these terms instead of the traditional terms, which are mindfulness of body, feeling, mind, and dharmas? He says, or he lists them here. These are usually presented as mindfulness of body, feeling, mind, and mental contents. And that's what the Buddha does in his presentation of these on a few occasions to his students. Rinpoche says that presentation has a slightly philosophical orientation, but in this discussion, I want to emphasize meditation practice. Therefore, I've translated the four as mindfulness of body, life, effort, and mind. And briefly, the first includes the body and other solid things, so call it mindfulness of body. And other solid things turns out to be primarily the breath. The second is about relating with life as a whole, rather than simply with the skandha of feelings, which is the traditional version. So I've called it mindfulness of life. The third is based on the idea of mental concentration. So I've called it mindfulness of effort. Interesting twist there. And the fourth is based on on mindfulness of mental contents, which is his gloss on dharmas. This translation as mindfulness of mental contents as the fourth one is really a sort of liberal translation, so to speak, of dharmas. The traditional version is mindfulness of dharmas. But he says it's based on mindfulness of mental contents, since the Abhidharma definition of mind is that which can perceive its own contents, which is slightly different than most traditional versions. Anyway, he calls it mindfulness of mind. Most importantly, the four foundations of mindfulness are not four different practices, or rather multiple different practices as presented in the Four Foundations of Mindfulness Sutra and in the interpretations of many teachers since then, which is that this presentation includes many different objects of mindfulness practice that would be practiced separately. But Rinpoche says these are 4 stages of shamatha practice. Boom. So somehow he's presenting the progression of shamatha through these 4 foundations. Somebody asked him a question, and the editor has sort of glossed this into a non-Q&A text. Somebody says, are these shamatha or vipassana? He says, they're shamatha. And then the person asks again, Cynthia, this is in 73 seminary.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your sentence there, but I just, don't some look at this as Vipassana though also? Because
Oh, many teachers use this as Vipassana, but they have there's like many different practices, whereas he's presenting it as stages of one practice. But yes, thank you. Most teachers viewed this as either exclusively Vipassana practice or a practice that spans shamatha and Vipassana.
And I will also just mention that I can't remember the source right now. I'll have to try to find it. That I was actually reading something in the last couple of weeks that was talking just like what you're describing, that rather than looking at the 4, they were basically saying a lot of people misinterpret these as being 4 separate objects, or practices, but that they're really just like all really just different ways of working with one practice. So in a way, very much like what you were just saying, I read something about that just a couple days ago. I'm going to try to find the source.
Well, the traditional version of it is that they're separate practices that are arranged in a ascending order, or in an order that maps out a gradual path through the path of practice in general. So there is that sense still of there being a progression. And then there's a related sutra called the Sutra of the Foundations of Breathing, which is very much a scheme that covers 16 steps that are all linked together, progressive practice, using exclusively the breath to enter into the absorptions, and then from there to experience Vipassana. Anyway, so that's how he's presenting it, 4 stages of shamatha. So then, how do we see that come through in his presentation is a big question. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that tonight, but so there's that point I wanted to just touch on. And then there's been this question of whether shamatha is directly connecting with the object of the breath or with a concept of it, and Rinpoche is pretty definitive. Let's see. An ordinary person, let's see, we're uncertain as to whether it's an unconditional body or a body of conceptualization. An ordinary person's experience of the body, known as the psychosomatic body, is largely based on concepts or ideas of body, whereas an enlightened person's attitude is body-body, simple direct relationship with the earth. In our case, we don't have much of a relationship with the earth. We may have some relationship with our body, but we're uncertain. We flicker back and forth, and so forth. So that's his opinion, and let's see. Here we go. Here, this is on page 37, the first full paragraph. Whatever we do in life, we're affected by our mind, etc. So at the end of this paragraph, so fundamentally the whole thing is psychosomatic. Our whole experience is psychosomatic. So what is the traditional progression of shamatha? How is the shamatha traditionally presented? And if you look at the 6 powers of shamatha as presented, for example, by Tashi Namgyal in Moonbeams of Mahamudra. But the 6 powers are presented in many, many places. The 6 powers start with learning the technique, and then the second one is understanding the technique, and then the third one is mindfulness, and the fourth one is alertness, sheshan, and the fifth one is exertion, and the sixth one is equilibrium. And the way Rinpoche presents mindfulness of body is very much a focus on mindfulness, the quality of mindfulness, and his presentation of the third foundation as energy is very much like the power of exertion in the 6 powers. And Rinpoche's presentation of mindfulness of mind as being the coordination of all of the other types of foundations of mindfulness that he just went through is very much like the presentation of equilibrium as the power of equilibrium, where we balance all the different aspects of the technique of shamatha. In particular, we balance mindfulness, alertness, and exertion in our practice, which are very much reminiscent of the 3 faculties that we just saw of heedfulness, mindfulness, and alertness, where heedfulness has this odd way of spanning either from relaxation in some presentations to exert a state of ardency like an intensity. And that leaves the mindfulness of life, and how does that relate to alertness? And basically, the excerpts I pulled don't really show it well, so I'm not going to spend time on it, but someday revisit it. Not today, but basically he talks a lot about mindfulness of life as relating to the senses. And when he talks about alertness, he often talks about relating to the senses of like our sensation of what room we're in, or in his examples, he talks about the tent that people are in. He talks about what you're wearing, what the people around us are wearing. So it has that sense of generalized awareness. In one presentation of the 4 foundations that's now in the book called Mindfulness of Action, Rinpoche calls this the second mindfulness life force, which is really odd. I couldn't believe it when I first saw that, but he talks about it having this quality of checking ourselves. When there's more chaos, we have the tendency to check back with ourselves. And so this is on page, oh no, this is not in the source book. Sorry, I mistakenly did not give this excerpt in the source book, the document that I circulated, but it's in Mindfulness of Action, in Action rather, pages 80 to 82. And so it has somewhat a quality of like, you can sort of maybe see how it could be related to alertness. Anyway, so let's go back to our collection here and scroll through these abstract and transcendental watchers, the temporary experiences, and then touching the surface of mind. As a further description of mindfulness. And this is his presentation of the mindfulness of mind, the 4th foundation of mindfulness. Okay, so now let's enter into the where he presents Vipassana. So, starting with the portable stage set, famous presentation of this cool idea that we all carry around, a projection of who we think we are. And we constantly produce a display, a theatrical scene for each situation. We create appropriate backdrop and appropriate lighting. And I'm on page 48 of this collection, the PDF. In Vipassana meditation, we deal with this kind of background, our portable theater. So this is Vipassana in terms of working with our ego, basically, the manifestation of our ego, as opposed to Vipassana as panoramic awareness. So in Vipassana, we deal with this kind of background, our portable theater, whether it's big or small is also always a deal. Vipassana works with that big or small deal, and whatever it is, in practicing Vipassana, instead of keeping very busy setting up your theater, your attitude is changed, so there's a sense of questioning how we produce this background, why we do it, whether we have to do it, and might not have to do it. This is still on the level of inquiry in some sense, but at the same time, it's experiential. In Vipassana, you as the practitioner experience the game you're playing and setting up your theater. And this book, by the way, The Path is the Goal, is the edited version of 2 seminars Rinpoche gave that were called Vipassana seminars. So has his presentation of Vipassana more extensively than most other sources. In Vipassana, you as the practitioner experience the game that you're playing and setting up your theater. From that, you pick up a new way of dealing with the whole thing without it being a game. This is a sitting practice of meditation. You don't sit for the sake of creating a display or a particular effect. It's a private thing. You relate to the radiation you're creating. Before you begin sitting, this radiation was created in order to impress or overpower your audience. In this case, the situation is reversed. You experience your own radiation face to face rather than playing with it in order to impress or overpower your audience. You have no audience when you sit, or you are your own audience. You've had the basic training of shamatha, therefore from there you begin to expand. Shamatha is extremely important. Without that, the practitioner can't experience Vipassana. But with that, the practitioner can expand mindfulness, so it becomes awareness. The use of those two terms for shamatha and Vipassana, respectively, mindfulness is being fully there, and awareness is a total sensing. In awareness, all things are seen at once. This could be called panoramic vision. Boom. This famous characterization. Panoramic vision, in this case, having a sense of the entire radiation we crave. We possess a certain mannerism or style that is reflected outward. He's talking about everybody except me, by the way. When you sit, this becomes purely a thought process. You develop a sense of appreciation, not one by one, but totally, of the things around you. It's like light radiating from a flame or a light bulb that expands outward. We find this, however, we find that this radiation has no radiator, egolessness. If you look into who's doing all these tricks producing the display radiation, there is nobody. Even the idea of somebody doesn't exist. There's a pure sense of openness that you can relate with the living world as an open world. However, we're just introducing the Vipassana experience at this point. Later, we'll go into greater detail. Later, I'm not sure if later ever happened, but what's necessary to understand now is that Vipassana does not proceed to the level of a game, but remains purely at the level of experience, the living experience of awareness. I think by this he means it doesn't become like this intellectual exercise, which I think is also why he didn't delve extensively into analytical Vipassana. Let's see. Continuing onward in the same book, actually going backwards in this book. I was going to do this chapter first. Sorry about that. Let's see. In this tradition from Gampopa, as predicted in the Samaji let's see. He says that Gampopa wrote a commentary in the Samadhi Raja Sutra that presents this tradition of type of meditation he's presenting. In that we find this notion related to breathing and mixing mind and space, which is also used in tantric meditative practices. And that's you can find this in various sources, this idea of mixing mind and space. It's become one of the very important techniques of meditation. Sometimes it's also referred to as Shilak Songjuk, which is Tibetan meaning combining shamatha and vipassana meditation practices. It's just interesting that he's correlating that with mixing mind and space. Presumably mind in that case is shamatha and space is vipassana. Combining them plays an important part in our development. Mindfulness becomes awareness, mindfulness taking an interest in precision, simplicity, sensations, and experiences. Awareness is acknowledging the totality. So he says this in so many different places, the totality of the whole thing. Awareness has been described as the first experience of egolessness, and the term for that in Tibetan is Loktong. For awareness is Loktong, and he quotes this expression that he quotes in a number of times in the seminary transcripts, Loktong Dakme Tokbe Sher, which means that Loktong is the knowledge that realizes egolessness through awareness. And this is the first introduction to the understanding of egolessness. Awareness is totality rather than one-sidedness. One is simply aware totally, completely. It also includes precision, which is the main quality of awareness in the early stage of the practice of meditation, which seems to be him saying that it includes mindfulness, which is the main aspect of Vipassana initially, is that it's sort of it comes from the awareness, the precision of mindfulness. Awareness brings egolessness because there's no object of awareness. You're aware of the whole thing completely. Everything is open. And then, interestingly, on the next page, 51, he says, traditionally we have the term smriti upasthana in Sanskrit, or satipatthana in Pali, which means resting in one's intelligence. Now, most people translate these as the foundations of mindfulness. Smriti in Sanskrit and sati in Pali is mindfulness. Upasthana and upatana are sort of the establishment of, you might say. Here he says, resting in one's intelligence, which is a gloss of mindfulness as being intelligence, as wisdom. This is the same as awareness. Here he's equating the two. Awareness does not mean the person practicing Vipassana gives up shamatha of, say, anapanasati, mindfulness of the going or coming of the breath. So anapanasati is this practice of focusing mindfulness on the breath. It's coming and going. Here, however, the meditator simply relates with that discipline in a more expansive way, relate with the whole thing. That is done with the four foundations of mindfulness. And then we have, let's see, this, I should have included this in the header, but this is a rough transcript. It's not yet, has not yet been edited by any of Rinpoche's editors. And it was transcribed by people at Westchester Meditation Center when we did a course on this series of talks that Rinpoche did called the Path of Meditation Seminar. And the talk 4 focuses on Vipassana in relation to shamatha. So you see that the language is very rough. We didn't want to edit it, but leave it in that state. So Vipassana is regarded as further experience of egolessness and the developing prajna, transcendent knowledge. Compared with shamatha, Vipassana is more concerned with one's inquisitive mind, taking full advantage of that and exploring it and developing. And so fundamentally, finally, that sense of exploration of one's mind becomes openness and egoless. So that's a sort of rough presentation of the types of or progression of Vipassana from investigation to the culmination as just complete openness by experiencing egolessness. Let's see, and then on page 53, in the middle here, a shift between Shine and Lokchong. So Shine is Tibetan for shamatha, and it's pronounced Shine, not shine. In Lokchong, or Vipassana, shamatha is, in the level of shamatha, there's a very specialized attention put on your practice, breath and breath. Very direct and simple, very narrow. In the case of the awareness of Vipassana, it's an extended version of openness, which is sort of him saying, we extend from that and experience openness, or develop into openness. You begin to find that there's lots of room apart from the object of concentration on the breath or your bodily sensations or whatever you have. Just an interesting statement, He's acknowledging here that we do take the body and basically whatever is happening to some extent as the object of our shamatha. But here there's more room, great deal more room, experiencing the environment as well as the object of our attention, namely our technique of breathing. The Buddha described the state of Lokchong or Vipassana as clear seeing, egoless, because we don't have to concentrate on our particular thing, which is a way that he often refers to like our self, our ego, too heavy-handedly, but we're our portable stage set, but we begin to realize the environment around our practice and our breath. So when you start with your breath, you begin to experience that environment around you is also part of the breathing, part of the whole basic being. You begin to feel the space around you. A sense of being is extended at the level that there's also a state of awareness that we all have our antenna sharpened constantly. So this is the way he spoke. It's actually a little bit cleaned up, but that you begin to feel it if you sit and meditate very honestly and earnestly. You begin to find somebody is watching behind your back, looking at your neck and examining you. And he talks about this in a couple of places of how in the transition to Vipassana you begin to have this feeling of being haunted. Like there's this larger awareness that begins to haunt you. Looking at your neck and examining you, and you begin to feel that there is heaviness coming down to you. You begin to feel that your bodily sensations rather, are as if you're wearing heavy coat or a turban, and all kinds of tensions happen in the back of your neck and your buttocks, your legs, and your arms feel awkward, and your body becomes more than there is at some point. Like your sense of your body seems to be expanded or expansive. But those are the vanguard of that Vipassana experience, which is really interesting because in the traditional presentation of the culmination of shamatha with the experience of pliancy or shinjong, Um, there is a description of a sense of pressure on the head is one of the main signs of the culmination of shamatha, and the pressure on the head and the body. And so it's really interesting to see him describe this. Those are the vanguard of the Vipassana experience. And so traditionally that would be sort of like you culmination of shamatha and then transition into Vipassana. That there's something taking place around you apart from the object of concentration, which is breath. There's something more than that taking place. More than that is happening. An extended version of that is taking place. And Vipassana is the seed or beginning point of developing meditation and action attitude. And he talks about this in a number of places, how Vipassana is in some people and some circumstances and in some senses cultivated or experienced more in post meditation, and similarly also helps us to bring the meditative experience into our post meditation life, i.e., meditation and action. You're able to extend your state of awareness to everyday life situation constantly, being watchful, aware of whatever you're doing in your life. Let's see. Skipping ahead, there's the term mindfulness, which applies to shamatha, which is being fully there with our techniques and everything, being completely watchful. And then we have, so I skipped to page 55, and then we have the term awareness, which applies to Vipassana, the second stage. If you are being too watchful, too mindful, it's possible you will lose your awareness. So you have to lighten up and expand that mindfulness into awareness. So let's see, he's describing the experience of shamatha, of mindfulness, being very focused, as in the experience, in the analogy of driving. And then he says, but then you need something else. He says, then you need something else than that, or something more than that. That is just adolescent level of being careful, but you can be much greater being careful. So the English is not great, but you can be much more careful by developing awareness, being aware. In Tibetan terms, there are two words. The first one is called Trempa, which literally means recollection, memory, sharpness, like our mindfulness, Trempa. Everybody usually translates Trempa as mindfulness or recollection or both. And then there's another word called Sheshan. Shenpa is knowing, and Shin, and this Shenpa, by the way, is different than the clinging that Pema Chodron is famous for talking about. It's a different Tibetan term. Shin means as it is, so knowing things as they are. There's some kind of sense of perspective involved, and so it's necessary to have both Trempa and Sheshan working together. And particularly paying more attention to the Sheshan experience as you develop later on in your practice of meditation. So he just affiliated Sheshan with awareness, and I'll do it more directly in another place. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I was here. And then in the middle of this paragraph here, he says, let's see. If you keep doing that, meaning if you keep doing the shamatha mindfulness practice, maybe at some point you begin to find that that's not the only thing that's happening to you alone, but you begin to develop in some sense of expansion, greater awareness, greater mindfulness taking place, which is awareness. And that is possible. That should happen. That would happen, provided if you keep faithful to this particular technique that was presented to us, what we're doing. So Sheshan, knowing as it is, knowing things as they are, sharpening our antenna, perceptual, visual, smell, sound, feeling, everything, sense of expansion taking place. Skipping ahead to the next page. So the question of Vipassana at this point is Sheshan, or the awareness experience. So boom, he just said the Vipassana is Sheshan. And when you have that sense of awareness experience taking place, and you begin to find new discovery, which is that it's not new, that experience. I don't know why we abbreviated that operating necessarily. That you really don't exist particularly. It is that is operating. The relationship, the vibration is operating rather than you are conducting the particular show. And one begins to feel a sense of hollowness inside, at the same time a sense of being, a very careful sense of being appropriate and real at the same time, of course. But nevertheless, there's a sense of hollowness that you are not operating at, but it is taking happen. It's happening on its own. It's taking place. It's happening. So, touching on the ego and the experience of egolessness.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
So this, this thing that he's talking about like the rental car,
Yeah.
you've never driven that rental car, but you kind of know how to drive it because you've driven a car, which is sort of the idea that I get from that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about this idea of like the mind, the breath being like a picture of the mind, and that we focus on our breath. And I was sort of getting this idea that he was saying um something about how like we breathe, we inhale, it happens, we can't really stop it, it we remember how to do it, we recollect how to do it, it just happens. And like, how does that, so we're talking about Vipassana, and I'm just sort of getting this, or trying to understand like this idea of like we recollect how to breathe. What is it that we're recollecting how to do in Vipassana that is similar to that recollecting how to breathe? And then also just sort of this idea that like we are not actually doing the breathing. We touched on that last week, that we are being maybe breathed into. And is he kind of like trying to flip that around
Yeah,
with,
he says we are being breathed.
yeah.
Think he's saying that um, the precision involved in following the breathing that's happening is mindfulness practice, is shamatha practice. And that the Vipassana experience happens when we begin to become aware that we're not the one that's making the breathing happening, that we're being breathed.
Are we to make then some conclusion there that we're also not really the one that's doing the thinking either, somehow?
Definitely, yeah, that's the extrapolation, yeah, yeah. That it starts with because we're focused on the breathing, we first experience it with the breathing, of like this breathing is just going on. And even when I like manipulate my breath, where is that agent residing who just decided and implementing either a slowing down or some sort of change to the breath? And then the Vipassana experience is experiencing what he keeps calling the totality of the situation, of like there's the body, there's the breath, there's the mind that thinks it's the agent, and Um, and the Vipassana experience is first noticing the larger frame, the larger expanse of that whole situation.
Is
And
it that it's non-dual, or is it that and something more?
well, I think non-dual would be more like the culmination of that experience, where then you realize, well, who is it that is practice or experiencing Vipassana? Who is it that's experiencing that totality?
Okay.
That would be like the next step in that progression. But I think the first step in like the first two steps in that progression are first to see the larger picture of body, breath, the faculty of recollection, and then I'm still here thinking about being mindful of the breath, and I'm being aware of the room around me, and then I'm being aware of the fact that I'm breathing with the body and being mindful of it, and I'm being aware of the room.
So I am
Just
very much still here.
um, but then not very much.
Okay.
It, it's definitely diminishing. And then the next step is, but where am I? It would seem to me.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else have any comment on that? Thank you for that. So let's see. In the middle of the next, he's talking more about the driver. And if you're a confident driver, you have a proper relationship with your car, you have a sense of being there, that you just move a little bit and the car goes, which is not your movement, but it's movement of the car dictates to you. So awareness dictates to you. So this is that next step in the experience where it's like, oh, well, who is aware? Who's being aware? So awareness dictates to you from that point of view, that awareness becomes part of your basic being, part of your behavior. They don't have to meditate as such, but meditation is conducting you, or you were being meditated rather than you were conducting the practice of meditation. As such, there's a sense of delightfulness that takes place, and a sense of openness in that experience of like letting go of the burden of being the one that's like there all the time. And that level, maybe then we could look in terms of meditation and action, in terms of Lakchang Vipassana.
Derek,
Yes.
it sounds to me like he's describing cocooning and caterpillars turning into butterflies.
Say more.
Well, because it's all, there's no, you know, it's all process. It just happens, and 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 uh, and it goes from this this sort of insular situation into a very open one, very on point to a very no points at all almost, um, and also this whole thing about agent. You know, there's a little thought game I play with myself where it's like, you know, it seems to me that there's, when I see something, that there's a me seeing it, but I can't actually figure out how I'm seeing it. I can't, you know, with my eyes open, I can't unsee it. So am I, where is the me that's seeing, right? It's my eyes that are seeing, you know. Also, like, I can't, you know, control the growth of my hair or my nails. There's no agent in that, right? I can move my arm, you know, but you know, it gets really tricky about, you know, where the controller is. And so yeah, that that's where the butterfly comes in.
Totally. That explodes the experience where then it just sort of blows up the whole frame idea of like an agent that is the operator of an operation, and to like this ownerless situation going on. And am I just observing what is going on in my body, speech, and mind, or can I talk to that that operator? Yeah, it gets sort of weird. But yeah, I love the idea of the metamorphoses of the caterpillar. So the caterpillar being shamatha, being very precise and mindful, like chomping along. And he uses this analogy in a number of places in this one we'll see from Heart of the Buddha, where he says mindfulness is chopping up our experience into frames. It's just like little by little by little, focusing on this, breath, thought, smell, taste, whatever, not taste, but smell, sound, sight, just connecting with that experience. And then Vipassana being the experience of the totality of the whole thing. So just like coming out of that cocoon, so the cocoon image is like the shamatha sort of almost brings you into this cocoon phase, I guess, where you become like that confusion that you say you're experiencing. It's sort of like the cocoon. It's like, so what's going on here? Where, who's on first? What's on second? And then being born into the butterfly is like expanding, like letting go of that effort to keep track and the effort to maintain the portable stage set, and just blossoming into the awareness of the butterfly. That's a good one. So let's see, going further on page 58, he sort of sums it up. I think that's the purpose of the Vipassana experience. Oh, actually, yeah, what is that he's referring to? So the practice of meditation at this level could be regarded as the experience of training your mind, your sense of feeling, touch, smell. There's no mysterious areas left at all. Every area has been explored and trained and worked on a different kind of sense of pride, in the positive sense that there's no mysterious dark corners left. We know our mind. We know all our little games. We know our neurosis, and we know the experience of the senses and so forth. That there's a sense of enormous pride, wholesomeness, completeness, that the universe or spiritual search does not become still mysterious anymore. It's very real to us, and one begins to develop a sense of intellect at that same time, that you can cut yourself or cut others for that matter. It becomes a very real experience. Now, when he says cut, he's not talking about cutting with a knife. He's talking, we can let go or cut the thought of me and other. Let go of that experience of dwelling on a sense of meanness and otherness. And that's the purpose of Vipassana experience and technique, is to bring ourselves down and down and down to the ground. I love that, where it says it's like to make us even more grounded than those experienced at the concentrated level of shamatha, which is, that level is okay, but it still needs more down to earth level. And that's a very funny statement, because normally we would have said like shamatha is very down to earth and Vipassana is like expansive and sky-like. So it's like, what does he mean by that? And maybe it's like shamatha in a sense is a little bit inflated by the intensity of each experience, the precision, that each object of experience that's experienced by the precision of mindfulness. And Vipassana then sort of deflates that by experiencing the environment around that, the space and the panorama around that, and the absence of subject and object. We finally begin to realize that sight, smell, etc. are very direct, literal, simple, and of course maybe it's beautiful, but no longer mysterious. So, any questions? Perfect. Is there any difference in the technique? Everybody asks this so many times. And he gives some different answers. Well, as far as the technique is concerned, it's pretty much the same. But, there's a but. In the Vipassana, you watch the boundaries more than the point of concentration. So what does this mean? That's really important, or really like in understanding his presentation, it's important. Like, so the point of concentration, like if we're focusing on the breath, the point of concentration is the feeling of air moving, whatever that means. We don't really know what air is and how it moves and so forth, but there's a sensation, right? And that sensation is the point of concentration. So what's the boundary? The boundary between that sensation and what is the question. The boundary of feeling around you, that you're not purely working on your breath, but you're working on the boundary around the breath. That sense of expansion is taking place, and expansion is presumably by virtue of experiencing what's around the breath, and the radiation is taking place. The radiation which he talked about before, radiation without a radiator. So radiation of awareness, in this case, it seems. That's simply a question of attitude. You see, the point is that there's literal teaching, and as literal, direct, simple teachings begin to develop, then you begin to expand yourself greater and greater, more and more wide level. And this part is fascinating because he points to this issue in the teachings, that is, there's literal teachings and there's definitive, or um, there's definite teachings. There's interpretable and definitive, and we start with the literal. And so he's correlating that with our meditative experience. We start with the literal experience of just directly, simply experiencing the object of breath and so forth. And then we begin to expand yourself greater and greater, more and more wider level, which presumably would be both the sort of uh, physical, so to speak, expansion of our awareness around the concentration point, the point of concentration, as well as experiencing, like, what's the significance of what I'm experiencing? What's this whole thing that Rob and I just talked about, of like, where's the operator? How is this going on? Is, I think, this process of expanding to a greater understanding. One begins to get a sense of, you begin to use your intellect subconsciously and imagination at the same time, subconsciously as well. So we're starting these terms, intellect and imagination, he uses as concept and non-concept, is his way of describing these. So he's implying that there's a movement from our normal intellect to a sort of subconscious level of that, and then non-conceptual experience of imagination as well, at the same time, subconsciously as well. So we're beginning to access the sort of deeper levels of our mind, both its the way that it structures our experience and the way that it can go beyond that structure. Like the fourth skandha, where all the sort of structures of our world reside, um, is like in our subconscious level, and we're like experiencing that more and more directly. And as you experience that, you experience what's beyond that structure. You experience what's around that structure, because, like, as you experience that structure, it defines itself and limits itself, and points out what it's not, points out what is beyond it. So at that time, the attainment of enlightenment, you got everything together. So he just like extrapolates, sort of like that goes on until you experience enlightenment. And then let's see, in the practice of moving from shamatha to the vipassana, does one just move, or does one need to push in some way? In other words, is there a danger of becoming comfortable in the practice, i.e. of shamatha? Rinpoche says, as we've discussed already, it's necessary to have someone to check your practice. And so this was a common theme in his presentation, was that you would have a meditation instructor who would sort of mirror your experience. And we see this in the excerpts I have in here from the what's called a manual for shamatha instructors, which is a transcript of his teachings to meditation instructors, where he's telling them how we work with students as a meditation instructor. And there's this very nuanced way of helping people get beyond the point of needing to be needing to be very precise all the time, and sort of religiously being mindful of the breath and labeling thoughts. He presents it that first we make that seem like it's rigid, like you have to do that, and that's the technique, and there's never going to be any change to that. That's the way it is. And you present it that way initially, and then there's this process of working with a student and seeing them get to a point where they feel like they don't need to be that literal anymore. And different people react to that stage differently. Some people still stay very loyal to it. It's like, well, that was the technique. I'm going to still label thoughts and be mindful of every breath. And then other people are more easily shift into a sort of laissez-faire attitude of like, well, I'm being fully present, and I don't have to label every thought. And so the MI helps people get, if they're uptight about letting go of the precision, helps them get beyond that uptightness. And if people are too relaxed about it, you help them. You sort of give them a boundary so they don't get too loose. So you have somebody check your practice, develop personal friendship or reference point. At the same time, you could develop your own intelligence for that. Is that when you begin to feel that you have to expand yourself rather than your practice is strictly at the level of being too faithful, and you begin to feel slightly different, that you can expand yourself. And at that level, if you examine yourself, your particular style of experience is concerned, you begin to find yourself actually doing Vipassana experience already, Vipassana technique already. So his language is also great. I'm convinced that he intentionally spoke in like this broken way instead of being very precise, because it like makes your mind loosen up our like fixation on proper grammar. That you transcended the shamatha experience. In any case, one has to take that kind of, it's like growing up, when you grow up, you have this ceremony called birthday party, which isn't quite really so. You haven't suddenly become a different person by the time when you blow your candles out and when you get your presents, i.e. another year older, but you've been growing all the time. So I think it's forced you to make random and specialized time and moment by marking a birthday. And now everything's okay. You become different because whatever. That's an analogy to sort of the gradual process of maturing and the relationship to the technique. So we have a little more time here. So let's go through another few interesting ones. So page 60. So this is from 1973 seminary, his first seminary. And we have in here somewhere actually talk 8 where he presents Vipassana. And somehow I have them in different order. Yeah, I'm on page 70. Yeah, why don't we do that one first? Let's see if we can make it back to this one. So skipping to page 75. Oh, let's just stop here for a second. This one. So this is in this book, Heart of the Buddha, and there's a talk he gives called The Heart of the Buddha. And I'm not sure what year it's from, but I think it's pretty early, like 73 or 4. Rinpoche, could you talk about Vipassana meditation? You mentioned it, but I'm not sure what it is. seeing clearly, superior seeing, clear seeing. Vipassana begins once we've developed substantial shamatha, being precise and mindful on the spot. Shamatha, sound, smell, feeling, thought, everything else are looked at, but with such precision that they're nothing other than stillness. They don't produce further bubbles or further percolation of any kind. What an interesting way of describing the shamatha experience. Everything we experience is stillness. We experience content as stillness, in that they don't produce further associations, conceptualization, or discursiveness. I'm going to skip this flashback of your father. Everything is chopped into that level of precision, into a grain of sand. That is shamatha. Usually memory is predominant. Another analogy. Shamatha means that everything is simply looked at, sliced up, not aggressively, just looked at. Look, look, look. Through shamatha, you're capable of looking at these experiences as individual entities without referring to the past or thinking about where they're going or what you're going to do with them. Everything is without beginning and end, just on the spot. So you chop your thoughts now, now, now. Out of that comes Vipassana. On the level of Vipassana, you chop thoughts because of your training of shamatha, but at the same time, you bring them along. Technical phrase, very, very traditional, common technical phrase, bringing your thoughts along. I'm being completely facetious. It's a completely unusual term. What the hell does he mean? At the same time, you bring your thoughts along. You pack them up in your suitcase when you go on vacation and you bring your thoughts along. The world is a panoramic view, but at the same time, things really don't hang together the way they ordinarily used to. So you're beginning to see the disjointed quality of experience by having chopped so precisely. Things are made out of pieces, simple realities, primitive realities, i.e. partless particles. Even if you smell onions for a long time, they're chopped into pieces. You smell them, you don't, you smell. If there were no gap, you couldn't smell at all. If there were no contrast. So he's talking about on the moment-to-moment level that you smell, there's gaps between moments of experience, right? So experiences are not continuous at the ego level. We think they are. We think they are all together in cahoots. I love that. But it doesn't really happen that way. Everything is made out of dots. When experiences are chopped into pieces, some realization of the unity of the display could come out of that, which is Vipassana. And so forth.
Just a question. It's just sort of interesting when he says unity there. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, well, he said, and the other thing that we looked at, he said the totality of a situation. And there's another place in here where he talks about shamatha as you're like petting a cat's fur, and you're seeing every hair in the cat's coat. And then vipassana is seeing the entire coat of the animal, seeing the larger picture. So the totality. I don't think he means like everything is one sort of thing, which is a common way of understanding things in the world, but rather that one sees how interdependence, one sees how things interact, and
Oh,
how
okay.
particles come together and form our impression of wholeness, and how we create this idea of things, whereas really they're just chopped, they're all just little pieces, but we experience a whole laptop and a whole computer and a whole meal and a whole this and that. And I think the idea is that with Vipassana, we're seeing how we do that with our world. We're seeing how we create the experience of totality out of the chopped pieces.
Oh, okay, because in a way, the use of unity and totality was kind of seemed like it was doing the opposite of what you would want, which is like,
Solidifying it, yeah, turning it
right.
into
So the
something.
words don't. What you just described makes total sense in terms of what the real experience is supposed to be, but these words make it a
Yeah,
little
Little hard to, yeah.
Yeah,
When you
thank
begin
you.
to feel, for instance, you touch a rock, you feel that the rock is not continuous rock of the moment, you know. So he talked about particles, and now he's talking about the momentary quality of consciousness, right? Matter is particles, mind is moments. When you hold your fan, it's the fan of the moment. When you blink, it's the blink of the moment. Nothing is demanded or expected. Everything's seen clearly. That's the definition of Vipassana, the result of shamatha. Things could be seen as a great display at Disney World. You realize that things are not all that together, but because they're not together, they are fantastically colorful. The more you see the mark of discontinuity, the more you see things as colorful. In order to see color, you have to take a rest, and you see color again. That same analogy of the smelling. So, okay, that was a interesting one. Okay, so Vipassana. So this is like the first talk in this first seminary where he presents Vipassana, and it comes right after the talks on the four foundations of mindfulness in that seminary. And the seminary, you know, was his first training for his senior students to really bring them into the deeper aspect of the Dharma. So how does he present Vipassana? So Vipassana is Loktong. He glosses the term. There's two types. One is Jegom, contemplating a certain aspect of the meaning of reality, meditating upon it. And the other is Jogom, which means simply resting, meditating on the abstract or intuitive level. So there's two types of meditations particularly involved with Loktong. So this is analytical Vipassana and non-analytical Vipassana, Jegom and Jogom. Analytical and resting Vipassana. Then he glosses, he gives this the same explanation of Vipassana as being the realization of egolessness, knowledge of egoless understanding, which is equated with the idea of discriminating awareness, wisdom. Longtonga Vipassana is the sense that we are including intellectual as well as intuitive knowledge in the teaching. So up until this point, intuitive is like shamatha, just like non-discursively, sort of less conceptually experiencing the sliced up reality of body, uh, liveliness, and mind. Energy and mind, the four foundations of mindfulness that he just presented, bringing together intuition and intellect. So here he uses intuition as opposed to imagination. Loktong is important. It's not sitting practice as well, alone. Um, there's, let's see, the flame that burns the fuel of conceptual ego mind is a famous way of presenting Vipassana. So let's skip ahead. The definition of Loktong is that which burns ego mind. That's the definition. It would be a misunderstanding to regard it as a technique in meditation after shamatha alone. It's something more than that. It's that which brings together knowledge and the meditative state of mind, prajna and samadhi. So what he's referring to is that vipassana occurs outside of meditation whenever we listen to and study the Dharma. So the three levels of prajna, hearing, contemplating, and then in meditation, it's vipassana meditation. That which brings together prajna and samadhi is vipassana experience. So at some point we bring that prajna of the first two types into meditation, samadhi, and then it becomes vipassana. Thus far, when we have discussed the Vipassana aspect of the practice, any kind of awareness that we practice is more mindfulness than awareness. It's an odd statement. He's sort of saying that I've presented mindfulness and awareness before, but that awareness that I was presenting before was really more shamatha than Vipassana, is the way I'm understanding that statement. But let's see the definition of mindfulness. is a burning candle interrupted by wind, stillness, ongoing accuracy. Everything is perceived and recycled. um,
So it's really Vipassana when you aren't doing it.
well, then it becomes, yeah, sort of resting Vipassana when there's no radiator, no agent. Lokchong Vipassana becomes more adventurous. We begin to include the intellectual aspect in our psychological makeup. The clear seeing begins to bring about a sense of relationship. The intellectual messenger, the conceptualizer, begins to become active and develop discriminating awareness. That smells awfully like analytical Vipassana to me. Um, Basic notion of the meditative state of Lokchong, as opposed to the other two types of prajna, is a sense of vastness, spaciousness. That you no longer have to be mindful, but you can be aware. So we could say that mindfulness is a journey from the outskirts to the central point. In mindfulness practices, you find mental activities, whatever. You begin to note the mental contents as being active, and then you focus your attention and begin to develop a sense of well-being by observing, seeing things as they are in their own light, which is a journey. So there's a sense of movement. In the case of awareness, it's direct in the sense that it does not take a journey or preparation to find the subject matter. Subject matter is like what sort of like his way of describing the content of the practice. We don't take a journey or preparation to do Vipassana. It doesn't necessarily demand putting your effort into it. It's not a forced experience. You just perceive things simply directly. So here he's talking more about the non-analytical Vipassana. There's a sense of Lokchong coming upon you rather than you working towards it, which he mentions in a couple of places. And let's see. Conclusion, so from that point of view, Lokchong is that which awakens the intuitive understanding of the practice and the teachings. And well, we're out of time, but I urge you to read these. A lot of wonderful things, and it's really cool when they're sort of pulled together in this way. Not necessarily in the greatest order, but uh, it's a good congregation of them. Any comments, suggestions, questions? Inez.
Thank you. That was great. And there's still things I don't get, but it's really, really helpful.
Good, good. Thank you. I'm glad it's helpful. It in my experience, it helps to read it over and over and over again, as well as practice, obviously. But Barbara.
We just wanted to say thank you to you, Derek, and to the entire class for a very wonderful series of classes. I have my little juice glass of wine.
Good for you. I don't know if anyone else did. We have a tradition in these classes where for the last class we bring refreshments, which began when we met in person way back in the last aeon. We would actually bring all sorts of refreshments and sweets and alcoholic beverages and so forth. So thank you very much for that, Barbara, and thank you very much for mentioning the input from everybody here. It's been very helpful and very enjoyable going through this. Look at Eric. It's doing weird things, that's for sure, with your screen.
Have a good summer, everyone. Rest of summer.
Yeah, enjoy your summer, and I'll be in touch about the Tuesday night for the fall and confirming the Monday night idea. It's Monday night work for people
Monday night is
on
good for
figures.
me.
All right, cool.
Works for me too. And thank you so very much. This was a wonderful
Yes,
class.
thank you so much, Derek.
My pleasure. I'm so happy that we got to do this. Here, here. I only have water, but here, here. Have a great summer,
You
and
too.
I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you, Derek.
Oh, let's we
Thank
do
you.
our chants.
Oh, right, we have to dedicate.
Yeah. Let's see, Shadra chants. Here we go. By this merit may all attain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing from the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death from the ocean of samsara. May I free all beings. By the confidence of the golden sun of the great east, may the lotus garden of the Rigdon's wisdom bloom. May the dark ignorance of sentient beings be dispelled. May all beings enjoy profound, brilliant glory. Be well, everyone. Have a great summer.
Happy
Take
summer.
care. See you soon.
Bye.